3 pace laps before we get a green flag here at the Cleveland Grand Prix, round 8 of the PPG IndyCar World Series. And once again, you get a look at those flags in the background, see how the wind is really affecting here. The drivers have not been out in the wind. It wasn't this blustery this morning, so they haven't really found out how that's going to affect them as they go down the back stretch. Let's take a look at the lineup for round 8 of the PPG IndyCar World Series with the full rundown of the grid for you. And starting on the pole, as we said, Al Unser Jr. with a new lap record here, his 3rd pole of the year. Alongside him, last year's winner, Paul Tracy. And then starting in the 2nd row, Emerson Fittipaldi. He had a great race here last year to finish 2nd. And alongside him, Nigel Mansell. They overtook each other 7 times in 2 laps last year. On the inside of row 3, Canadian Jacques Villeneuve, his first time here at Cleveland, the fastest in the warm-up. And Robbie Gordon alongside him, like I say, should be good in the rain. On the inside of row 4, Mauricio Gugelmin, his first time here. And alongside him, Stefan Johansson with his best qualifying attempt this year. On the inside of row 5, Arrivederci Mario on his last year tour. And alongside him, the Honda power plant of Bobby Rahal. On the inside of row 6, Jimmy Vasser out of Discovery Bay, California. And Mark Smith out of Oregon alongside him. On the inside of row 7, from Milan, Italy, Teo Fabi. And from Mexico, Adrian Fernandez. On the inside of row 8, Canadian Scott Goodyear. And then the rookie, Brian Herter, who had a crash yesterday. On the inside of row 9, Michael Andretti. Alongside him, Dominic Dobson in the Pac West entry. On the inside of row 10, Raul Bosell, disappointing in qualifying for him. Alongside him, rookie Scott Sharp. On the inside of row 11, it's Mike Groff and Dutchman Arie Luyendyk. On the inside of row 12, Alessandro Zampedri had a great race in Portland last weekend, and Andrea Montemini racing with an injured left foot. On the inside of row 13, Hiro Matsushita and Marco Greco carries out that row. On 14, Willie T. Ribbs on the inside, Parker Johnston in his Honda entry on the outside. On the inside of row 15, Giovanni Lavaghi, a rookie, and Ross Bentley out of Canada. And finally, it is Jeff Wood starting from the back on row 16 on his own. 85 laps is 2.36 miles around this track. There are 7 right-handers and 3 left-handers. The crucial overtaking areas will be going into turn 1 under braking. And if you remember last year, we had a huge pileup there on the start, and they had a good disciplinary meeting this morning reminding everybody you've got to get through turn 1 to win this race. That's where we'll see most of the overtaking. Also coming out of turn 8 under power as they shoot down towards the main start straight away. Coming out of 8 is going to be a big area for overtaking, but that's going to be a case of getting the power down, which the Penske, as we've seen, are able to do that better than anybody else so far this year. Everybody else is trying to play catch-up as we have, I believe, 1 more lap under the yellow behind the pace car, and we'll go green flag racing. 2 pit stops today for fuel and tires, and of course if it rains we'll see them come in and change for the wet tires. A lot of these teams do have wet tires along the pit wall at the back of the pits and ready for any rain action they should get.
Field is now in an alignment position going through the last chicane just before they come to the start-finish line. We watch for the green. Green is out, though. It seemed that Al Unser Jr. got a bit of a start. Now let's take a look at him. Spread out wide. Well, maybe they learned a little bit of a lesson from last year. Nope, not everybody. Michael in trouble. Michael wasn't here last year. So 2 cars together on the start. Scott Goodyear is one of them. Michael Andretti is the other.
Well, that's very similar to what I thought was going to happen into the first turn.
Scott Goodyear back under power as we go back to the race itself. And Mansell has made his move and dropped into 3rd place. Out in the east loop of this track. Now making the turn along the main grandstand. Ahead of them is a right, then a quick left. Al Unser Jr., Fittipaldi, Mansell, and then Tracy.
It is an interesting statistic that only once has a leader of the first lap of this race gone on to win it.
Now here's the best place to pass. You can see Mansell going right down in there. He was feeling him out. He didn't pass there, but he's just going to try it pretty soon. Watch it because it's the easiest place on the track to do the passing.
Strung out single file right now, but still in hot pursuit is Nigel Mansell, who also has much to prove today. This time last year, he already had a couple of wins under his belt. He really wishes he were in that position now.
Mansell, by his standards, is having a terrible season. Winless, as you said. He had a foray into Formula One a couple of weeks ago in the French Grand Prix. He ran as high as third, but broke down. It's not the kind of season which Mansell, who thrives on success and the adrenaline it brings, is having.
And has created ongoing speculation about where Mansell will drive next year. Will it be in the Indy cars, or will it be in Formula One? The BBC is reporting today that Nigel Mansell will in fact be driving in Formula One next year.
Well, Paul, I believe that, and I believe that you're going to see Michael Andretti in his car next year. But I think what you're seeing this year with the Lola cars versus the Penske's, which right there, the car on the right, was Mansell. The red and white cars, of course, are the Penske cars. And what you're seeing is the Penske cars are more flexible. They are racing these cars exactly the same way that they qualify them. And Mansell, for example, the Lola cars, they have a problem. They get them tuned up really good, but the cars are almost too finely tuned, and they can get out of tune on the chassis just real easy.
Scott Goodyear, you saw, got back underway, and now Michael Andretti is underway as well, though he continues with a struggling season since that victory at the first race of the season in Australia, and for the second time in a row is the slowest of the Renard cars in qualifying here today. And then his problem on the start itself. One of the reasons that you want to qualify high up, you don't want to get caught in a mid-pack incident. Nothing changes in the top four.
You can watch also the vapor coming off the rear wings. Look at the wings right there, the right and the left-hand side of the wings. That's the vapor in the air. It's kind of chilly today and got a lot of moisture. Hits the wings, and it shows you what the aerodynamics are doing with the cars.
This, of course, is one of the wide runways that I spoke of, but they go off this into a right-left S-bend, and that's where it's extremely rough, where the runway intersects the taxiway.
Watching the rest of the field come through and centering up on Mauricio Gugelmin. We saw Robbie Gordon, Jacques Villeneuve, and here is Gugelmin, who currently runs, trying to catch up with a Renard of Villeneuve.
Watch the cars bounce. You can also see in this shot how close to the ground they get. The cars actually tip and touch the ground as they go through these turns, especially where it's really rough.
Mario Andretti on his Arrivederci tour. I'll tell you what, every city he goes to, there's plenty of folks turning out. His car is just always surrounded. Johansson makes a move to the inside, shows himself to Andretti. But that's not a corner to pass. The next one is.
Johansson in the blue and orange car.
Back at the front. Mansell very much on the move now.
This is Mansell's strongest show of the year. He was strong here last year, had a sensational battle with Emerson Fittipaldi. It shows that he obviously has a knack for this place. And I think one of the reasons for that, Paul and Bobby, is that he is able to dump the car into the turn and accelerate so hard out of the turn. It's a characteristic of his style, and it really suits the way you have to drive this track.
Well, you know, Stan and Paul, I don't know a driver in this race that doesn't really like the Cleveland track, except for that spot right there just on camera. They can make mistakes all over the place, and at least they normally don't have crashes from it.
But you do get beaten up something bad. You walk up and down pit lane, and you see guys wearing you know, padding on their elbows and Band-Aids on their hands.
Mansell closing on Paul Tracy. It is still Al Unser Jr., Paul Tracy, Nigel Mansell, and then Emerson Fittipaldi. We may have suggested that Fittipaldi was in second place when in fact it is Paul Tracy. And Fittipaldi sits back and forth. And this is the battle on the track, these three cars right here. Fittipaldi waiting station, if you can say that, at the kind of speeds the Indy cars turn.
Fittipaldi is the most successful of all the drivers historically at this track, with his 3 wins, most laps led. So you know he goes into the race with an extremely confident attitude, if perhaps not quite the speed of Al Unser Jr. and Paul Tracy, his teammates.
You know, if you watch the bumps as the cars go around the track here, realize that the driver's seats, their rear ends, are only like 1.5 inches from the ground. So when the car touches the ground, which it does, it has skid pads on the front and the back, it really hits the spines. Now, little Al has been in and out of the doctors all weekend because he's got problems with his spine from all the bumps here.
Well, Scott Goodyear, as you know, had his problems on the start, went in and out of the pits. Jack Arute, you have an update?
Well, Paul, they checked after he had the problem on the start. Scott Goodyear came in, but on the way out after the mandatory check on the condition of the car, they found nothing wrong, but Goodyear exceeded the 80-mile-an-hour speed limit. So once again, he was brought into pit road that last lap, and he was given what's called a stop and wait penalty. A stop for 5 seconds, and then he was sent back on his way. Things are not going well for the Budweiser crew. Let's check in with Gary Gerald.
Well, Jack, as far as Michael Andretti is concerned, who was involved in that incident on the green flag in turn number 1, the crew expected once Michael got restarted that he would come in. They laid out fresh tires over the wall, but Michael stayed on course. So obviously the car has responded okay. He just lost a considerable amount of time. He stays out there now at the back of the pack.
Of course, Scott Goodyear this weekend, we see
Jimmy Vasser had an onboard
walking
fire.
back.
Second race in a row, he is out very early. Too bad for Jimmy Vasser, the driver of the Conseco STP car.
He's really an upcoming driver and really looks good this year. It's a shame.
One thing we should perhaps say about that stop and wait penalty, if you have a stop and go here at Cleveland, you can actually get out on the course and gain position because of the nature of the layout of the pits. So when they bring him in for a stop and go, they'll also hold him sometime to make the penalty a valid penalty. Al Unser Jr., car 31, leads here, followed by his teammate Paul Tracy, with Nigel Mansell doing everything he can to close in. And the leaders are already encountering the slower traffic. Back at the Grand Prix of Cleveland, presented by Goodyear, as we watch the leader, Al Unser Jr. He is running a dominant race once again here. In second place is Paul Tracy. Nigel Mansell is third. Emerson Fittipaldi is fourth. Nothing has changed there. Jimmy Vasser is out of the race. Let's go to Gary Gerald.
Well, a season that started with such great promise for Jimmy Vasser has taken a nosedive. What was the problem today, Jimmy?
Well, just started the race. I don't know what lap it was early in the race. The engine just cut out, and I looked down the dash, and it said fuel alarm. So something malfunctioned somewhere in the car that just lost power. We started out good this season, and we're hitting a little soft spot now, but it's definitely not a nosedive, Gary.
Okay, well, they're 7th in points coming in. Disappointed. Next week in Toronto, better fortune.
Yeah, we're going to come back. We got a great team here, and you know, that's racing. So we'll get them next time.
Thanks. Paul?
I think the good report is there that there is no fire. Probably one of the observers saw some smoke from something that overheats as soon as the car comes to a rest. But at least they don't have a lot of damage to rebuild.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody to look at the bottom of the cars if you want to see what the suspensions go through on these race cars. How rough it is, how short a travel they have to have. Just watch the underneath the cars, and you can see the daylight to the point where they look like they're touching. It's interesting to watch this.
Also, as you're watching the cars closely, remember that the exciting thing about the season so far has been the superiority of the Penske's, and in particular, what has made the Penske's better? The talk is that it's their traction off the turns, that they get better acceleration off the turn. Watch for that here. Mansell's been unable to match it in qualifying and practice. Now he seems to have traction identical to theirs.
And this track, Sam, seems to emphasize itself on shock absorbers more than any other track. Just watch the underneath of the cars again and imagine. It's not so much the body moving as it is the tires. The shock absorbers really catch heck here. For example, numerous Reynard cars already this race have broken their shock absorbers. That's how rough this track is. And yet it looks like it's smooth enough for airplanes, which it is.
Well, of course, the rival teams would like to think that the Penske cars are somehow cheating in some ways, that they have a traction control device which would be illegal, that would be effective. Chances are that is not true. It's probably a combination, as you mentioned, Bobby, the shocks, the differential, some suspension, the way they use their tires. But it is tempting if you're a rival of the Penske's to think, boy, they must have some widget, and I wish I had that widget too.
They're not doing it, Sam. I was given the job by you and Paul this week. Check that out, and I've come to the conclusion that the only way that you can do a traction control is to measure the front tire to the engine or the rear tire to the engine or to each other. These guys have nothing in the car to do that. So, in fact, I'm sure that they're not cheating. They just have good cars this year.
You saw Al Unser Jr. as he had to work his way through traffic. Now the battle between Paul Tracy and Nigel Mansell is suffering the same fate. And traffic could very definitely be a factor, though most of those that they've encountered have been wise enough to look in their mirrors and get out of it right away.
Every time they go into that turn 1 right there, that's where we're really looking for the passing to happen most of the time. But if you'll notice Tracy when he went in there, he's really looking at his right-hand mirror to see if Mansell's going to take a run at him right there.
Al Unser is 4.9 seconds ahead of his teammate, Paul Tracy. You're on board Nigel Mansell now.
And just remember, what you're seeing are the driving actions of a man who is the defending National IndyCar champion and the year before that Formula One champion. This man may not be having a great season right this minute, but he's as good as they come, and he really has a wonderfully aggressive style.
We'll just watch him right here for the moment as Mansell trying to catch Tracy.
Down that long back straightaway, second fastest place on the track.
This is the fastest road course that they run on all year.
Lavage. Something's broken. Looks like a water pipe in the back. A lot of steam coming over the top of that car.
That probably means an engine went, Paul, and it got into the water. That's really an expensive type of a brake.
Unplug your helmet there. There you go.
This is the car that Buddy Lazier usually drives. He's not missing much today.
Back at the front, Al Unser Jr. Nearly 5 seconds ahead of his nearest rival. Exactly the same pattern that he established at Portland 2 weeks ago. There's the leader coming through over in the East End. Second place is Paul Tracy. And Nigel Mansell right on top of him.
You can notice that Nigel is running a little bit tighter line than Tracy is. Being a little bit conservative. Remember, they both realize it's very early in the race. Look at all the vapor coming off their wings as they go fast down the straightaways.
You see the bumpiness there as we ride with Nigel Mansell. Whenever they make the right-left combinations and go from the runways to the taxiways, that's where the roughness exists. Out on the runways themselves, it's pretty smooth.
You got a glimpse of the top 6. 7th is Mauricio Guzman. 8th is Mario Andretti. Stefan Johansson is 9th. And Bobby Rahal. This is the first track Rahal ever won on. He currently runs in 10th.
And of course, when he was introduced to the crowd before the start, a terrific ovation. He comes from Ohio. He's really popular here.
In fact, folks in the Buckeye State have more than one driver to cheer for here, because Brian Herta goes to Ohio State. In fact, just finished his junior year there. Would you like to be doing that? Wouldn't you like to have been driving an IndyCar and going to college at the same time? What a life.
Wouldn't that be a life? The cars, incidentally, also we might watch for during the races. This historically is a bad track for transmission. You can see with all the bumps. You can watch us. We were on board with Nigel Mansell a while ago, all the shifting that goes on. The bumps really affect the transmissions bad.
Mario Andretti now challenging Mauricio Guzman. This is a fight for 7th place. Guzman, the 88 cars, they both duck inside, slower traffic, and Guzman holds Mario Andretti off. Gary Gerald, you have an update on Herta while we watch this battle? Well, no, let's hold it just a second. Mario makes his move to the outside. Can he sweep in the corner across the front of Guzman?
Remember, too, a battle between different chassis. Guzman now, Mario back on the inside. A beautifully executed pass by Mario. Mario in the Lola, Guzman in the Renard, a car all new for the season this year, and he's got the inside line. Nope.
You should not eliminate the fact that Stefan Johansson is sitting just behind him as well. So that's a good, tight battle. Gary Gerald, Brian Herta has rolled to a stop on the front stretch. Can you update us now?
Can't tell you what that problem is. It's just the culmination of a horrendous weekend. Contact with Lavaggi in yesterday's practice session. Had to go to the backup car to qualify. Then this morning, a motor problem. Had to change engines. They started the race with radio problems. Now, here's a new complication. This has been a real tough couple of days for one of the local favorites.
Well, and you saw in that fight, too, that Johansson also got his way around Guzman. So that puts Mario up a position into 7th. And Johansson into 8th, and Guzman drops back to 9th. And just behind him now is Bobby Rahal. As you can see them trying to push Brian Herta's car over to the edge of the course and get it out of harm's way. So at the top of the order with a 5-second lead is Al Unser Jr. His teammate Paul Tracy is in 2nd place. In 3rd is Nigel Mansell. And the battle with Mario Andretti and the rest has broken off for the moment. We're back at the Burke Lakefront Airport, the Grand Prix of Cleveland presented by Goodyear, and we have a change in position. Well, Al Unser Jr. is still a full 5 seconds out in front of second place. The new second place, as you see there, is Nigel Mansell. Paul Tracy has been pushed back to third. Mansell was able to get around using the traffic. And there is Dominic Dobson, who spun in the first turn, so the yellow flags are out at the start-finish line. Let's take a look at the pass again. Here's Nigel setting himself up on Tracy. Slower cars just ahead.
Now you can watch. Nigel captured him, pushed him over, used the traffic to hold Tracy in, got right by, as you can see there, the white number 1. Nigel Mansell, hard way to pass, but he got it done.
So Nigel Mansell now sits in second place, and Tracy has the obligation to catch up. Fittipaldi continues to wait station in third. Robbie Gordon sits back. Fittipaldi is right station in fourth. And Robbie Gordon sits back in fifth.
And you notice Tracy has fallen back just a little bit, Paul, and that's because the track here is so fast that the aerodynamics mess up the wings behind and the guy behind. The problem Nigel was having before, Tracy is having now.
Almost like on an oval. And if you wonder why Penske is having such a great year, remember that his drivers from last year, Fittipaldi and Tracy, are currently running third and fourth. Nigel Mansell would be leading this race were it not for Al Unser Jr., Penske's acquisition for this year. Al Unser, in my view, a man who combines the speed of Tracy and the experience of Fittipaldi, and you see him way out front defending the Penske honors right now.
All right, let's go pit side. I was going to go down to Jack Arute for the moment, but we'll continue watching Nigel Mansell as he tries to close the gap, which is growing with Al Unser Jr. now at 7.5 seconds. He carries the number 1, the sign of the defending champion, but Bobby Unser, there are teams that even if they win the championship, won't put number 1 on the car because some view it as very poor luck. You're one that could view it that way.
Well, lots of times when guys have number 1, they go right backwards the next year. There's little Al trying to get through the traffic. Boy, it's getting low. Now that's what he's got to worry about an awful lot today, is the guys working each other really hard and him trying to lap them at the same time. But back on that number 1 right there, you see Nigel Mansell. Last year, he won many races, had just a super year. This year, he has number 1 on the car. It seems like everything's gone wrong, and it's been that way for a lot of the drivers over history.
All right, let's go to the pits now, and Jack.
Robbie Gordon, a tough break, passing under a yellow condition in a corner, has been issued a stop and wait penalty. 5 seconds are up. Gordon is away, and he lights the tires up. He is not at all happy with the penalty.
So Robbie Gordon suffers with that one. That'll take him down through the field.
Nobody ever likes the penalties here or at any rate.
Whoa.
He just gathered that up. Gordon has had 3 spins during practice and qualifying. He almost added a 4th there. We've been riding on board with this man for 2 days, and it has been a heart-stopping, thrilling experience, as you just saw.
You know, Sam, if I had to analyze the whole weekend, we've watched him spinning out so many times, I think he's got a shock problem. The car seems to hold really well, and all of a sudden he hits some sort of a bump. The rear wheels jump right out from under it, and he spins out. But this is a good racetrack because you don't normally hit anything when you spin out.
The penalty cost him dearly. He fell down to 17th place just with that little 5-second stop and wait penalty.
Well,
Gordon, the order staying very close together.
Gordon, after his bad start at Australia, finished 23rd down there, has finished 7th, 3rd, 5th, 6th, 3rd, and 4th. So actually, he is having a terrific season, and he's one of the few people to pierce the Penske armor. I mean, he's been up there on the winner's podium in 3rd place a couple of times.
You know, for example, on the shock absorbers, looking right there, Robbie Gordon to the right hand, the Cummins car there. You know what happened if your shock absorber is just a little bit too tight on the rebound, it'll literally jerk the rear tires right off the ground, or the front tires as far as that goes, but the rear tires are really the biggest problem. As far as cars spinning out, that's often the problem.
Well, you know, Robbie is an off-road specialist where the shock absorber travel can be, what, 18 inches, 2 feet sometimes in those big pickups. So it's surprising that he's having trouble with that aspect of the car.
He just about lost it again right there in that turn we just saw. The car took a big, rough, hard step. Here's the onboard electronics. That'll show you what he's doing.
Now, Ford Electronics giving us the gear changes, not the braking, mile per hour and RPM.
He's not turning it, Paul, as tight as we normally see them turn, especially the Ford Cosworth engine. They normally turn up around 13, 13.4. Now, I don't know why they're doing that here, except that maybe their fuel mileage isn't quite as good as they want to be. This is a fast track. RPM is up, a lot of the way around the track.
We pass over the 25th lap of the 85-lap scheduled distance here, and already the pit stops have begun. None of the leaders yet. Mario Andretti was in and out of the pits, routine. And there's the leader, Al Unser Jr. Again, dealing with traffic, but still with almost a 5-second lead as here comes Nigel Mansell in, Jack.
It's his mark. Nigel Mansell hits his marks. The jacks go up. A very methodical stop for Newman Haas Racing. Not wanting to make a mistake, they're going to change all 4 tires, as is the norm. They do check the radiators, but taking an inordinate amount of time getting the fuel in. 14.2 seconds, believe it or not, gentlemen, is a slow stop nowadays.
Boy, did you like that burnout as he came out, though? During practice, there was this great battle between the Newman Haas team and the Penske team. Both of them lighting the tires and just roaring out of the pits with smoke pouring off of the tires. A little bit of an argument to show whether or not they had traction control, because the presumption is if they did, they wouldn't be able to do that, and both teams were doing it.
That's a good way to look at it, Paul. In fact, that's the best analogy I've heard of it. It will not do that with traction control, and they have no switches in the cars to turn it on or turn it off.
Let's say there are no switches that anybody can find. Let's take a look at he comes out of the pits here and lights them up. Another good way to get the rears hot. Also a good way to get the car sideways.
Gee, you'd think we were at an NHRA.
Well, you know, ironically, it's easier on the drivetrain, the axles, the transmissions, if they bust them loose like that, than back a few years when they tried to get out without busting them loose, because when they slip that bad, there's nothing really binding that hard.
Back to the pits, a report from Gary Gerald.
On the pit wall, Bobby Rahal. Was it a motor problem, Bobby?
Yeah, it just lost all its oil pressure and, you know, started to vibrate. It's too bad. The car was handling beautifully, and we were just sort of able to hang on to the lead guys, but, you know, sometimes you'll get this.
I understand there may be a new version available by Michigan.
Well, we're even maybe hoping earlier than that. You know, my feeling is we've got to go for it no matter what, and, you know, just disappointed today.
Thanks, Bob. We've got to go. Pit stops, Jack Arute.
And Gary, Al Unser Jr. is the first of the Team Penske cars to come in. His teammate Paul Tracy now will dart directly in front of him. Now, they're not going to make any changes on Al Jr.'s car. Their work is almost completed. In the interim, as Al Unser Jr. goes out, Paul Tracy will take a wing adjustment on the front wing. Watch for a twist, maybe a slight turn. There it is. They've completed their work. They'll go out and away now. We also received word, Paul, that Mario Andretti is the next guy to get a speeding ticket on pit road. He's being called back in for exceeding the 80-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Well, you know, one of the things that's happening on that, Paul, is Andretti, for example, is at the far end of the pits, and those guys think down there, and they have been during the practice, immune from the radar detector that tells their speed.
Oh, they think they're beyond it.
Well, they think they're beyond it. That's what they've been doing, and they were getting by with it in practice, and I have a hunch that CART was able to catch up and catch them doing this.
So little Al in, Paul Tracy in, Nigel in, Emerson Fittipaldi picks up the lead of the race, but he comes in as well. And Gary Gerald waits for him.
We watch over the wall. Now we see the nose of the car. He's coming in hot, Paul. Doesn't have to lock it up. He hits the spot, and that is so important because of the length of the fuel hose, of course. Watching and listening now with the crew. No changes as far as wing setups on the front of the car. The Penske machine is off in 15.2 seconds.
And you talk about lighting the tires. Nice going, Emo. Again, the traction control question, at least there, has been answered.
Yeah, that's for sure. And again, these cars here don't have complete locked rear ends. That's where the left rear tire and the right rear tire turn the same speed as they do on an oval. Here, they run limited slips in the rear end. So that's the reason you see the cars a little bit sneakier coming out of the pits than you do on an oval track.
You know, Bobby, one surprise that I had here this weekend is several people asked me about the power of the Mercedes engine in these cars. The word doesn't seem to have totally gotten out among all race fans that the Mercedes engine was good only at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and they are back to running the Ilmor engine.
Yes, they're absolutely running what is determined as to be the stock Ilmor. In other words, the standard engine that anybody can buy. The Mercedes engine, unfortunately, we'd all like to see it the rest of the year, but it's out of the business at least until Indianapolis next year.
So for the leader, Al Unser Jr., who reassumes the lead, 30 laps are now complete. The first round of pit stops is also finished. 85 laps. The scheduled distance here, 201.37 miles in the Budweiser Grand Prix of Cleveland, presented by Goodyear, and Al Unser Jr. is showing his incredible power of both himself and this remarkable Nigel Bennett chassis. What a great design it's been.
Let's keep in mind one thing. Little Al right there in the 31 car has back problems. His back is really hurting him. All of these bumps. Look what the car's going through there. It's really bothering his back a lot. And of course, from my standpoint, I hope it doesn't bother him during the race.
Paul, you mentioned Nigel Bennett, the designer of the Penske cars. I had a wonderful talk with him the other day. I congratulated him on the success of the season. He quickly said, remember, the season's just half over. There's a lot left to go. And I said, well, why are the cars so much better than they were last year? He said, first of all, they're only a little bit better, but my design philosophy is each year to eliminate another mistake that I made the year before. Try to make fewer and fewer mistakes. And really, in a sense, with this year's car, it seems that he's made really almost no mistake. Although in his mind, I'm sure there are some shortcomings that he'll improve next year.
Well, how perfect and how methodical. Al Unser Jr., an 8-second lead over the second place Nigel Mansell, followed by Fittipaldi, Tracy, and Alessandro Zampedri is moving up into the top of the order as well. Overhead, the Burke Lakefront Airport floats one of America's most enduring corporate symbols, the Goodyear blimp. Here today to help us with coverage of the Cleveland Grand Prix presented by Goodyear. There she is in a gray sky and looking down on Mario Andretti, who took a sudden and quick spin actually over on the straightaway and then drove the car across the track and climbed out with damage to the left front. So we'll have to find out what caused the spin. It seems like it was contact with something or somebody.
Well, obviously his left front bent really bad. The suspension is, Paul, so he had to have contact with somebody, it would be my guess, especially the way it's bent.
Emerson Fittipaldi now closing on Nigel Mansell and has him in his sights. That's Mark Smith, who had a great qualification effort here today, just between them. Fittipaldi looking for a position alongside Smith. He's got him, and now he is in contact with Nigel Mansell in the battle for second place.
Remember, both Nigel Mansell and Emerson Fittipaldi, former world champions, but belonging to a different era in Formula One, more than 10 years apart, their championships, now racing almost wheel to wheel here in Cleveland.
You know, the one thing that Nigel wants to do, like right now with Emil breathing down his back like that, he wants to have just enough gap where these guys in front of him don't interfere with getting caught. In other words, that's how he was able to pass a little while ago, and he doesn't want to get caught in that. Look at all this traffic coming up. This is where things really change. Now, Emil's pressing hard to try to catch Nigel in a bad position right now.
It says something about Nigel's motivation, Bobby. Don't you think that even as talk seeps out through the press that he probably won't be doing IndyCar racing next year, he's still fully motivated to succeed wherever possible in the remaining races this year?
Oh, he's a thoroughbred, Sam. There's no question about that.
You know, and when you consider how good everyone says the Penske chassis is, look at the drive that Nigel's been involved in to keep the Lola configuration in a constant form of competition with the Penskes. It's either he or Gordon that's always running at the front. Now he's got some serious concerns on slower traffic in front.
I still think that the Lola chassis has to be too fine-tuned in order to stay where it's running right now.
We've got a battle going here. Nigel Mansell being charged. While we watch this, let's try and get an update on Mario Andretti's situation, Jack.
Well, Paul, for the last time in his driving career, Mario Andretti has come out of the cockpit in Cleveland. What broke on the car, Mario?
Nothing broke. Well, it broke after I got hit. The car number one just miscued there a little bit, and he hit me on the left front, and it broke the right. It broke the wishbone.
A tough break, but looking at the track conditions the way they are, what is your assessment of the change in the weather? How has it affected the cars?
Oh, everything for the better. I think everybody's going quicker. The times that we're running out there are almost qualifying times, so the tires and everything are just taking a big breather today.
A teammate of yours, Nigel Mansell, you say is the one that hit you. What do you say to him?
I'm sure he didn't want to do it, but could have been more careful too.
Paul?
Oh, got chunked by his own teammate, Bobby.
Well, I think it kind of shows you one thing, that teammates don't plan races out and teams don't tell who's going to do what during the race. I think that's kind of the proof of the pudding right there.
Well, Nigel Mansell now becomes a question mark on the line, sitting currently scored in second place. But if that damage happened to Mario's car, what kind of damage might Nigel have?
Well, not really probably going to have any damage because the rear is much stronger than the front. You can just see the mass in the rear compared to the front. And Mario said that Nigel hit his rear on Mario's front. Mario's the one that went away. Nigel's rear obviously is okay because he's still flying.
All right, but let me ask you something else. This track is rough. You've already said that. Physically rough. There's a lot of travel in the suspension here. In the past, it has damaged half shafts and constant velocity joints in the rear suspension. Could this extra blow make a difference?
Not really to that, Paul, because the bumps are going to get the transmission and the drive shafts, the CV joints, as you mentioned, but it's really not going to get the suspension as much as you might think.
Boy, Nigel's really got his work cut out for him. That's Michael Andretti in the red car right ahead of him right now. Teo Fabi in the yellow car, one step up. He's got to get by both these men who are extremely aggressive and who are having their own battle before he can be sure that he's safely in front of Emerson Fittipaldi. Of course, he's dogging him.
And that's one thing they don't like to do. Those guys in the front that are having their own battle don't like to be bothered by somebody that's going faster than them.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of pride at stake.
All right, as we watch this battle, which is broken off for the moment, it gives us a chance to take a look at the confrontation between Mario and Nigel Mansell. And that's the bump right there.
So Nigel's first reaction was anger.
Yes,
he thought Mario pulled in on him, which I don't think was the case, but you can see how totally unintentional it was.
Yeah, that was a collision that, boy, there was a close one right there.
Well, this is a decisive moment because remember, you talked about Michael Andretti here in the red car on the right taking over the seat next year on Newman Haas from Mansell. So there's a lot at stake right here.
As Nigel moves under inside Michael. Boy, look at Michael. He's coming right back at him.
This is the great racing for which Cleveland is famous. Remember the battle between Emerson Fittipaldi and Nigel last year.
On board Michael. That's Nigel just ahead. Emerson's about 8 inches behind.
Now, Michael's going to try to keep up with Nigel, but I promise you, he's not in the same class. That car has not been as fast as Nigel, although you could see the killer instincts in Michael. As soon as he got past, boy, he really started going for it.
Well, Nigel, of course, is lapping Michael, so that's decisive as to the difference in speed of the cars. Notice that roughness as they go through those S-bends, though. Lap after lap after lap. If you're at the wheel, you're really taking a beating.
You know, Sam, that could be very well what's wrong with Michael. His speed has not been good for the whole weekend. And it just could be that he just can't seem to get that Renard chassis working through the bumps. If you can't work in the bumps here, you might as well just know you're going to have problems all day.
The Burke Lakefront Airport. For all weekends in the year except this, it is that, a general aviation airport. But today it's a race course for the Indy cars, 2.3 miles around, 10 turns. 40 laps are now complete, and Al Unser Jr. is 18 seconds out in front. We'll be back. We're past the halfway point now. 44 laps are complete. And we'll take a look at how he got here.
This is Dominic Dobson.
That's Dominic Dobson, and that's the second time he's spun, but this is in a different place. This normally is a real bad place to spin. Normally they hit that wall out there and race cars get all broken up. He spun it awfully early, so he might have had a little help getting somebody pinching him down or something. It's rare to see him spin that early in the turn.
I'll tell you what, I would prefer that I were not sitting there if I were Dominic Dobson.
So
let's go to the pits once again, and Gary.
Paul, we need to update the ongoing woes for Robbie Gordon. Remember, he started with such promise in the third row, had that stop and wait penalty. Then they came in with a punctured right rear and had problems with the axle. That cost them an inordinate amount of time. Slipped to 25th in the lineup, now back up to 21st. Been a tough afternoon for Derek Walker's team thus far. Let's go to Jack.
Well, Paul, as we show you a shot, you can see the speed limit sign for pit road. You see the man in blue next to him? That is the man with the radar gun that determines whether you violate the speed limit or not. We're in Jacques Villeneuve's pit. We'll show you where the speed limit stops. At the end of his pit, right here, there's an additional, maybe almost a quarter of a mile of pit road where the drivers are allowed to accelerate as fast as they care to. But it's the man in blue that'll get you if you go over 85 miles an hour on pit road.
Yeah,
That's what happened to Mario Andretti and to Robbie Gordon.
Yeah, but Jack, hold on a second. How far down is Mario's pit?
Mario's pit, believe it or not, is only 2 pits away from the man in blue. Ought to tell you something about the acceleration on these Indy cars.
Exactly my point. Up to 80 miles an hour and what, about 45 feet?
Well, they could have got him coming in, too, for both of you guys. Mario was obviously speeding, but it could have been coming in as well as going out.
We see a battle here between Raoul Boesel in the yellow car and Arie Luyendyk in the blue car there with the little red nose on it. Now, what's interesting about this, if you've been following the World Cup, Raoul is a Brazilian. Arie, of course, is from the Netherlands, and Brazil beat the Netherlands yesterday in one of the exciting matches of the year, 3-2. It's kind of being rematched again here out on the racetrack.
You don't think they're carrying that soccer right to Burke Lakefront, do you, Sam?
Well, maybe thoughts of it anyway. They're both big fans.
This is a battle for ninth. That's Willie T. Ribbs that Arie Luyendyk is just moving around. Luyendyk's having a great day. He started 22nd, so he's chopped his way up through the field very efficiently.
Well, you saw his car take a big wiggle, the blue and white car Luyendyk. You have to watch him close, because in some of these turns you watch a guy get really sideways and quiver right back straight, almost before you can see it if you're not looking close.
Willie T. Ribbs, while he is in the shot, is not in the fight. He runs 17th, a lap behind Luyendyk and Boesel. A lot of conversation here this week about Raoul Boesel and what his future may be. Bobby, were you in on any of that?
No, I really wasn't, but he's one heck of a good driver, and he's with the Dick Simon team. That's really been a pretty good team, and they put a lot of their emphasis into that car, which is not a rental car. That's one of their race cars.
Well, of course, the issue, Bobby, was whether he would be staying with the team. Apparently, in Brazil, newspapers reports had him fired from the team. I think the genesis of all that was back when Nigel Mansell was flirting with Formula One, maybe going to leave the Newman-Haas team. Haas thought he might need another driver for the second half of this season, and one of the people he approached was Boesel. Boesel said, yeah, I'd consider that if that ride was offered to me. Because of that, Dick Simon, his car owner, then sort of said, well, maybe, I'm not going to have Raoul Boesel for the rest of the year. Now, apparently, it's all been patched up. I mean, it was a wobbly moment for both Simon and Boesel, but they're back together again. Mo Nunn has been fired from the team, their engineer, but Simon and Boesel are still together.
Well, Sam, I don't think that Boesel is going to be leaving that team, would be my guess. And I think Carl Haas is looking at some other drivers, but if I was Boesel, I would definitely try to get it.
Yep.
Raoul, who started 19th up in that fight with Luyendyk, as we watch the 40 car of Scott Goodyear. Remember, he had his problems on the start of the race and now is trying to get back in the fight as well, but still well down in the running order.
Here's a boy that hasn't really had an awful lot of luck this year. Things in that team are really not clicking. That's one of the, here's the telemetry we had. Now look at the RPM on the middle deal there. He was on up at 12, a little bit better, 12,000 there. Let's see if they have the same concept. There's about a 12.4. No, about a 13,000 there.
Yeah, he's pushing it pretty hard.
Delco telemetry here gives us something a little different with the lateral G's. Now remember, Scott Goodyear used to be a race driving instructor. In fact, one of his students was Paul Tracy. And he'd look at something like this lateral G's, which tells him how much energy he is really throwing left and right as he goes through these corners.
And on the right-hand side, you can see the throttle up to 100%. That means it's wide open. You can see Scott is not using as much throttle as he'd like to be. This, of course, when that yellow is clear to the top on the right-hand side, that's what makes the car go faster around here.
Well, Goodyear's 6th Cleveland start. His best finish here has been 10th.
Electronics are revolutionizing this sport, and as they take their form in telemetry, it means that every move the driver makes out on the course can be analyzed, both by himself and by his engineers. It means you really have Big Brother looking over your shoulder when you drive now. If you say, hey, I'm going into that turn flat out, and they look at the telemetry afterwards and say, no, you're not. Well, you're not.
The You used to be able to fib in your days, didn't you, Bobby?
Yes, you could. Right now, today, they just look on the sheet and say, hey, boy, this doesn't agree with you.
Bobby, of course, never did.
Al Unser Jr. runs in the lead. Nigel Mansell still in second place as we continue to watch the fight here in Cleveland, Ohio. We'll be back after this message. Back at the Burke Lakefront Airport here in Cleveland as we watch Nigel Mansell continuing to try to catch the extremely elusive Al Unser Jr., who runs in the lead by 17 seconds. Not even in view of Nigel. He knows he's out there, but he can't catch him.
You know, Paul, the one thing I've noticed about Nigel, we have an onboard camera. We watch him from the other cameras. He's trying harder today than I've seen him try in a long time, and he's been taking a lot more chances, bumping people, really trying hard. So that tells you how much advantage the Penske car has with little Al's.
Well, of course, one of the things is with Emerson Fittipaldi right behind Nigel, he has plenty of inspiration for going hard and particularly for making difficult passes. And he's going to have to make two tough ones with Bosel and Gujamin right ahead of him on the road right now.
Now, neither one of those are going to give way because they're in a battle by themselves. And the other fear, of course, that Fittipaldi
he just wasted time there.
He wasted a great deal. Fittipaldi's problem is going to be that if Nigel gets past one of them, they may see Nigel, but they may not see Fittipaldi, so he's going to have to tiptoe.
It took Fittipaldi this whole time to reel Nigel in after Nigel made that good pass on Michael Andretti and another one on Teo Fabi. We saw that about 10 minutes ago, and it's taken that long for Emerson to reel him back in again. That's how important the passing is.
You know, I know there's a lot of talk about Nigel leaving the Indy cars. I hope that doesn't come to pass. It has been a real joy watching him here today at this track a year ago when he and Fittipaldi went side by side, lap after lap, not giving any place on the course, literally side by side through every corner.
And if you leave it up to Emo, it's going to happen again because Emo's really, look at Emo, how hard he's working on him, using every bit of drafting he can do, using every bit of advantage, trying to capture Nigel with the traffic. I mean, Emo's working as hard as you ever see him work.
Meantime, though, Al Unser Jr. is pulling away, and one of the discouraging things for the opposition of Al Unser Jr. is that he starts fast, and he actually gets faster relative to the opposition as his tanks lighten. He was 17 seconds ahead a few laps ago. He's now up to 20 seconds ahead.
And that is that fight for 8th and 9th. Guzelmin and Boisel sitting just in front of them. Pit stops are due within a couple of laps here. So the pressure will be on the crew of this man. Now, if you want to talk team racing, this is when you see it the most. There's nothing he can do while he sits in the pits. But what can happen is they can lose precious time and distance on the race course if they take too long with a pit stop. So the Penske team, one of the best in the business at it, anticipating the stop of Al Unser Jr. here within a lap or two.
Well, you know, you speak of the quality pit work of the Penske team, and, you know, we've been talking about this almost as long as modern motor racing has existed. The Penske pit stop. It's alliterative, and you think, my gosh, they are the best. One of the reasons for that, I think, is the continuity in that team. Their mechanics stay with them year after year after year. A tradition is built up, and it's maintained.
As I watch little Al going around the corners, I see his tires literally coming off of the ground.
On board with Nigel, but he may have more problems than we think. He brushed the wall earlier. This is a lap earlier. Keep an eye on number 1 there.
Oh, look at that. That's
just
fire.
One
rear tire only, though.
That was fire, was a magnesium. The wheels are made out of magnesium.
And the leader, Al Unser Jr., is in the pits. Let's go to Jack.
Well, Paul, direct your attention to the front of the car, the wing area. The word we've received is that Al Unser Jr. has requested a wing adjustment. After they complete their work, we'll look to see if they give him it. Looks as if they won't. They may have thought better of it. Stay with what you've got. In 13.7 seconds, a nominal, normal pit stop for Team Penske once again.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I'd want to change something working that good.
Nigel, of course, has now had contact with Mario with his right rear wheel and with the wall with his left rear wheel.
That's both rear ends.
Would you want to be driving that car, Bobby? I don't know.
Maybe it's back in line now. So Al Unser Jr., the leader, makes his second stop. That gives the lead over to Nigel Mansell, but of course he is due in very shortly, as is Emerson Fittipaldi. Paul Tracy and the rest of the front of the order.
Now, the one you saw with Nigel going out and hitting the wall with his left rear, now I promise you, that could hurt something a little bit. When you saw all that magnesium flare up, it takes some pressure to do that.
But if it's only in the wheel, then this pit stop should cure the problem, right?
Yes, and they'll change that for sure, Paul, and it definitely hurt the wheel for sure.
Well, you're just in front of that wheel that is the question mark. Gary Gerald is waiting while the Newman Haas team is ready to do some repairs. Maybe they can button the camera down a little bit too. Gary?
They warned him of speed as he came down pit road. No problems. We can see where the left rear brushed the wall. Actually, they call it white walling the tire. Mansell, who ran in Formula One at France last week, said it was smooth as a billiard table. Said when he came to Cleveland, it was a real shock to the system. But in 14 seconds, he's back out and no apparent damage to any of the suspension.
And I hope careful about the speed limit. His teammates suffered from that earlier. Jack?
Well, Paul Tracy gets out and away as well. They made a wing adjustment on his car. He does not exceed the speed limit, at least according to the one that was posted. The only member of Team Penske left the pit.
Whoa.
Michael Andretti down inside of Paul Tracy, Jack.
One of the things, Sam, that happens, you know, there is a right-hand turn as you exit pit road. You are literally high up on the throttle, and you find yourself weaving right into turn number 2. So it gets a little dicey coming out of the pits.
Well, exactly, Jack. We just saw some of the better racing of the day right there at that turn you described.
Emerson Fittipaldi in now, Jack Arute.
And Emerson Fittipaldi looking to make up time. The crew goes to work. We'll see if they make any adjustments on the machine or not. It looks as if it's going to be only tires. Rick Reineman and the team, they check the radiators for debris, taking on a full load of fuel. They drop the jacks, and Emerson is away in 14.7 seconds. And he almost has a problem going out of pit road as he found traffic overcoming him on driver's right.
That was Guzman who came out along with Fittipaldi, and of course Al Unser Jr. will move back into the lead of the race, and Nigel Mansell and Fittipaldi will come out side by side in a battle for position.
There's Nigel right in front of, Emerson right in front of Nigel now, and maybe this is Nigel's best moment to get by him right there under braking.
Now, they didn't see that coming. Nigel was not expecting that. That was a total surprise to him. But boy, did he react at the next turn.
Isn't it amazing, given the number of variables in a pit stop, pulling in, getting the car stopped, having it all happen to your car, and then getting back out, that they resume exactly the way they left off.
Look at they come out now. Of course, Nigel is on a little warmer tire, so it's sticking a little bit better. First, he gets past, and then he comes right back and takes over the position.
And you notice how quickly Emo moved over into an aggressive position where Nigel had to go around him.
Emo did a good job there.
They both did.
So Nigel Mansell in a battle with Fittipaldi is back into second place. The leader is Al Unser Jr., and we are having a great time in Cleveland. 62 laps of 85 complete. Al Unser Jr. is still the leader as we look at beautiful downtown Cleveland. Boy, I'll tell you what, we've had a great time in this city, and all that smoke belongs to Ari Lyondike, who rolled to a stop with what looks to be a turbocharger fire. No danger to the driver here on the front stretch.
Obviously,
I'll tell you what, there is no such thing as a bad seat in the house here. Everybody gets to see everything.
Yeah, the whole racetrack is like that. Ari's fire, incidentally, is a turbocharger, like you said, Paul. And it's from an engine blowing, obviously. The oil gets in the turbocharger. There's really no fire left, but you can see it coming out of the pipe of the turbocharger. Not really hurting anything right there. It's just the oil from the engine that got up in there.
Too bad. Ari and his group, Regency Racing, were having a fairly good day, moving into the top 10 and very definitely in the fight.
I think it would have been a lot safer, of course, with the truck out there to have pulled that car off into the grass right there. That's a place where the cars come out of the turns, get really wide, and go right in the groove where he is. Ari,
of course, wants to run across the straightaway because it's the shortest distance to the pits, and the IndyCar safety people said, nah, I don't think so. Fifth place car, Jacques Villeneuve.
He's really one aggressive driver. The guy in the blue and white car, the player's car there, he's the most aggressive young man I have seen in years, Paul.
And easily, wouldn't you say, Bobby, the discovery of the season?
I think he's the discovery of many seasons that we've had. Right, I think he's really good.
He's leading in the Rookie of the Year points, leading Scott Sharp, who's also having a good season, but nothing as spectacular as this young man.
Tom Reynard in the field right now, looking very solid. Just ahead of him is Willie T. Ribbs, a service merchandise car.
Willie is always good for a quote, and I asked him yesterday what it was like to drive around this track. He said, it's as bad as a rough night in Harlem.
Well, there's a good race driver in the Trans Am. Boy, Willie T was untouchable for a long time. Not done quite as well with the Indy cars. He's had a lot of different rides. There you see Villeneuve trying to get by Willie T. But he's going to catch on one of these days, and when he does, he's going to be as tough here as he has been in the Trans Am cars.
Do you think, in the case of Willie T, that as his teammate Robbie Gordon comes past trying to get his way back up through the field again, that all of that time in Trans Am cars may have hindered him, may have taught him techniques and styles that he's having trouble shaking now that don't apply to the Indy cars?
I totally agree with you, Paul, 100%. I think it's created bad habits for him, and I think he just stayed there a little bit too long. But I also know this, people, human beings are capable of changing. One of these days, he's going to catch on, he's going to get the right signal, he's going to take off because he is one.
Whoa!
Emerson
locked him up totally as Fittipaldi.
That's turn one.
Misjudged the braking area in turn one, and now is falling backwards as he's got to get it back up to speed. That was costly. There's also a continuing display of smoke at the back of the car.
Yes, and that wasn't dust for a while. It was too much smoke.
And there is Paul Tracy behind him. Now remember, Tracy was running fourth behind Fittipaldi, and you see he's right on top of him now. There goes.
And Fittipaldi's got more than a brake problem. He's got an engine problem. I wonder if he wasn't sliding in his own oil.
He probably really was, because he's definitely got smoke coming out. And
let's look at it again here, Bobby. Here comes Emo into the braking zone.
Yeah, and here he is. He's awfully late. He's too late on the brake, and no smoke right now, though. Now we've got a lot of smoke coming down. Front tire's locking up, and there's smoke in the rear. You can see smoke now, but he's not to the turn yet. So obviously he's broken something. Could be the rear end.
There's more than one problem there, Jackaroot.
Well, Paul, believe it or not, Paul Tracy, his teammate, radioed into the crew to let them know that the rear end of the car was literally on fire. So they are calling Emerson Fittipaldi in right now.
Oh, no, he's not coming in. He stopped on the edge of the course. Black smoke poured out of the exhaust here. Fittipaldi's out of the car as they've put the fire out. He was in no danger with it.
You can see that dark gray smoke coming out of it. That's material burning, like carbon fiber, oil combination, but not steam from the engine.
All right, let me ask you the question then, Bobby. We talking circuit roughness? Is that something to do with the rear suspension of the car?
Well, I don't really think so. He could have had a transmission problem going. Most likely he had brakes overheating. This track is really hard on brakes.
So Emerson Fittipaldi is out of the fight. His teammate Al Unser Jr. continues to lead. And Paul Tracy now moves up to third place with the retirement of Fittipaldi. Back in the Buckeye State, the Grand Prix of Cleveland, presented by Goodyear. There's Adrian Fernandez, currently running in 8th place. As we watch Raul Boisel, who sits ahead of a battle, 6th, 7th, and 8th, which is Boisel, Gugelmin, and Fernandez. This is Raul's 8th race here in the Cleveland Burke Lakefront Airport. And there they are. The Hollywood car belongs to Mauricio Gugelmin. That's Fernandez just behind him.
They've been having one heck of a hard race. Fernandez back in the last of that little pack right there in the green and the red car. Mexican driver from Mexico, and he's really catching on this year. Driving for Rick Dallas. Little Al seat that he left last year, at the end of last year, for Penske's ride this year.
The Bud car of Scott Goodyear is not in the fight. He actually is 21st. But he can provide camera coverage for us as we look ahead to the 88 car of Gugelmin.
Gugelmin is a driver that's really looked good all year. Ironically, he's a teammate to Michael Andretti, a team that really doesn't associate with each other very much.
He is, but he isn't.
But ironically, Paul, he's been the fastest of the two all year so far.
Not a whole lot of information being shared between those teams then. Gary Gerald.
Well, for Mauricio Gugelmin, some encouraging news in the last couple of weeks. They have found extra money now, or revenue, that they can get into a test schedule. He was able to test just one day thus far this season. Now they've scheduled 4 more test days, 2 for oval track, 2 for road course. They think that's going to help them immensely as they try to become more competitive in this series.
Well, he can't help but help.
I know that, and in my opinion, that boy needs a lot of help. He's one of the brightest ones we've seen all year. You linked him with Robbie Gordon, and a few of those guys like that, you're looking at some really good drivers coming along.
Gugelmin, of course, with a long background in Formula One, one of those men who's found his way now into IndyCar racing at the top.
71 laps now complete. 85 laps, the scheduled distance here, 201 miles. Fight broken off for the moment. There comes Fernandez, the lone driver for the Gallus team, which in the past has been a multi-car team with such greats as Danny Sullivan and Al Unser Jr. Danny Sullivan, by the way, is on the grounds here thinking about next year. One of the other drivers that constantly gets named for places like Newman Haas Racing. What do you think of that, Bobby?
Well, I really personally don't think Danny is going to be back. I think in his mind he's kind of retired, but you and I have a little bet on it, so we'll see how that comes out next year.
I think he'd like to be with Newman Haas, don't you?
Well, that might motivate a guy a little bit. Newman Haas is a pretty good team.
I was going to say, who wouldn't? Looking back for Stefan Johansson. That, of course, is not him. Stefan's just behind the 19 MyJack car.
The red and the blue car, Stefan Johansson. One heck of a good driver and really been grinding hard today.
And another promising driver, Alessandro Zampedri, who's being just lined up now by Stefan Johansson. Zampedri on the right, bright young talent, I think, from Brescia, Italy, where the Mille Miglia used to start from. Zampedri, who I talked to, Gary and I both did at some length the other day, talked about his background in Formula 3000 in Europe and how he's making the adjustment to the Indy cars. You see, he's having a beautiful run against Johansson.
Johansson, of course, driving for Tony Bettenhausen, based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. Alumac's the sponsor on the car. Just behind them, you get a glimpse from time to time as Nigel Mansell closes in. Johansson runs in 5th place. He's having a marvelous day. You see Nigel right up in the corner of the screen there as we look down from the Goodyear blimp.
Johansson driving for car owner-driver Tony Bettenhausen.
Well, this gives you an idea. It is truly an airport. There's runway 24 right. They come off onto the taxiways.
But you know, I gotta say again about Zampedri. Here's a car, and then Johansson's making a bid. We'll see if this is a clean shot. Yep, he lets him go by. That's a nice, clean thing, not for position. Zampedri's running 10th. And it's not often that you see Dale Coyne's equipment running that far up front. Robbie Buell was their driver the early part of the season. He was usually mired down around 18th or 20th. So this is a real good day for Dale Coyne.
Well, Dale Coyne, who used to be a driver, Sam, I think he's kind of relates to the drivers pretty well.
You know, one of the interesting things about the Burke Lakefront Airport is it being a FAA runway airport facility. Naturally, there are a lot of planes landing here, so there's a buildup of rubber on what is already a fairly abrasive concrete straightaway for the Indy cars. And the guys the first couple of years were so surprised where they'd come sliding out and they'd hit that area where all the rubber had been laid down by the aircraft, and the car would just suddenly stick real good and launch ahead. So now they've made it part of the whole way that they race here at the Burke Lakefront Airport. So Al Unser Jr. is out in front now with 75 laps complete. He is dominating this race here. The waterfront of Cleveland, Ohio. The view is down from the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company blimp. They've dispatched the blimp Spirit nearby Akron, Ohio, to provide aerial views of the 1994 Cleveland Grand Prix. There she is, floating overhead, giving us some great coverage shots as well today.
Yeah, you know, they didn't have to come very far to get to this race. Those guys really like that.
You got our boat parked down there in the marina. Boy, look at this. There's some spectators on the side. Hi, Ari. Hi, Emerson. Emerson doesn't even know we're here.
Well, there's two drivers that are sorry they're out of the race. Look at them. Well, you can just see him out there just grinding his teeth saying, wow, I wish I was still in there.
I'm not even going to ask why they were out there, though. Jack
in front of the toilet.
Jack?
Well, a problem on Mike Groff. He's come to rest in what we call the back 40 of the mains of the racetrack. He's not going to be able to make it back in without a tow. The reason, the fuel pump let go on the race car, so it's an early exit for Mike Groff.
Well, that's too bad.
More Honda problems. Isn't that a shame?
Yeah, but boy, when they get it going, get out of their way.
There are 3 Honda engines that started the race. Now just one in the car of Parker Johnstone is still running. That one not in contention.
And most of these Honda engines, incidentally, under different configurations.
Mauricio Gugelmin now in a fight with Fernandez. Battle for 7th.
I started to say the Honda engines are different configurations. They have Some of the engines, like in Ray Hall's, they fire 2 pistons at once, like they do the Ford and the Ilmor engines. And the others are like normal passenger car engines. They're different configurations from Honda, so they can try to do their development at a faster pace.
Bobby, it's interesting. The one that's still running is the older configuration Honda engine. The 2 newer ones had trouble. They've tried all sorts of stuff in the last couple of weeks. They've had 4 test days. They tried a new plenum. It didn't work out, but they've got a fire lit underneath them over at Honda, and they're trying to be competitive now.
So watching Gugelmin and Fernandez. Fernandez sweeps to the inside, and he's got him.
The favorite place to pass, right going into turn 1.
Fernandez grabs 7.
Often the guys pass like that, and then you would see the other guy come back again, somewhat like Emo did when he came out of the pits.
These are 2 Reynard cars. Reynard, of course, being the new chassis manufacturer, new to the series this year.
And started off winning, of course, in Australia, so we thought maybe they were going to dominate all year, but they seem to. There's Michael stopping for some reason.
Another Renard,
another
as he comes
Renard.
to a stop at the edge of the course. IndyCar safety team right there to get him clear of traffic. Look at the nose of the car.
Yes, he's definitely got the right front. Looks like it's bent, too. The nose got bumped and the right front bent, so he probably ran into somebody else.
The nose actually was damaged earlier, so there's been yet another incident. Here's Teo Fabi. Now look at this combination. Fabi, of course, had a brilliant start in IndyCar racing back in 1983 when he had the pole for so many races, won several races. Now the word is this might be his last year in IndyCar racing. Apparently Jim Hall has tested a driver in secret, a young driver whose name has not been released yet, at Rattlesnake Raceway, Hall's private test track down in Texas. The idea is that Fabi may be on his way out. Now Fabi had a brilliant 4th place at Detroit a few weeks ago. You see Al Unser Jr. coming by him with great ease there. I don't think there's any question. I don't think anyone, even within the team, questions Fabi's ability. It's the idea of getting some new blood and reconstituting the team.
Dale Fabi runs in 9th place. In 10th place is Alessandro Zampedri. And Robbie Gordon, owing partially to driving and partially to attrition, is moving up. And Gordon now runs in 11th place. Michael Andretti, of course, retired if you look at the running order 4 laps ago, 5 laps ago now. 81 laps now complete. We're in the closing stages of this race. This man going to do it again? Boy, it sure looks that way. But one can't forget, when you have an onset like Fittipaldi had that took him out of the race, if I'm in one of those other cars, Bobby, I got to be thinking, have I got the same engineering problem?
Well, they're evaluating that. I promise you, that's an advantage to having 1, 2, or 3 cars. There's a lot of disadvantages, of course, but that's one of the advantages. You have problems with one, you look at the other one. When Little Al came in her pit stop, they're obviously looking really close at the car, so they can tell whether to slow down, keep its pace, or speed up.
Well, Penske domination has been the story of the season this year so far. But except for Al Unser Jr.'s performance today, the Penske team has not been dominant. Mansell has been very fast. Emerson Fittipaldi has had trouble. And unusually enough, Paul Tracy has not shown exceptional speed. He's 3rd now. He's never been up front in this race. And it's only Al Unser Jr. that's really held the pace for Penske.
And normally you'd say this is Tracy's track.
One of the other things about running on an airport circuit, they will not let the IndyCar officials install the specialized computer antenna lines that sense the car's passage over the track. And so we don't have our usual EDS scoring here, back to the old manual scoring system. And so we're not able to bring you quite as many representations of the field as we would like to, but we are getting some great help from Russ Thompson and Fran Leonard, who have been keeping track of everything here in the booth for us and doing a superlative job in doing that. Money comes right here, guys, no problem at all. Al Unser Jr. out in front. Nigel Mansell runs in 2nd place, but it's a long way to go to get up to the front.
But you can see from the beating that the drivers take here that at any moment something can go wrong. A suspension part break.
Just watch Nigel's head right there.
Yeah.
I mean, he's really getting a lot of beating. Looks like he's getting beat up pretty bad.
Airplanes, of course, have a lot more suspension travel than IndyCar.
Yeah, about 5 feet compared to 5 inches.
Just look at little Al's head go up and down those last bumps that he went through. Really a rough course. He'll be sore tonight.
And you say little Al is actually suffering from some back problems, but do any of you notice that when you're in the car?
Absolutely. He is so sore getting into it. They've already had to change his seat, Paul. He was doing that yesterday. I was down this morning popping his back. He's been down with the doctors while they've been working on it.
Jim Swintow with the white flag. One more lap to go for Al Unser Jr.
And he's up right behind Villeneuve, who is almost to get lapped, but of course it won't make any difference at this point in the race.
So Al Unser Jr. from the pole to a win here, if he can only complete this lap, and that seems so very certain at this point. In a marvelous season for little Al.
Remember, this will make 5 out of 6 times that Al Unser Jr. has started from the pole and gone on to win the race.
You know, he's going to outdo us. He's going to outdo his father's record here, Dad, Big Al's record before too long, because he's winning an awful lot of races this year. He's already getting up with A.J. Foyt and my brother Al.
Al, your brother's one thing. He goes after your record. That's real trouble, right?
Terrible.
So Al Unser Jr. down the final long straightaway, looking at career win number 24 and the 5th of the year. A right, and then a left, and then a checkered flag lies in wait on the runways of the Burke Lakefront Airport. And Al Unser Jr. has taken his 5th win of the year and stretches his points lead in the IndyCar battle for the championship. Raul Boesel, Adrian Fernandez just behind him. A battle for 6th place. Can Fernandez get him before the line? The only battle left on the track as it turns for home.
It's going to be hard, but he's going to try.
Fernandez trying to catch up. Just a few hundred feet to go. He might be able to get it done.
Don't think he's going to do it, Paul.
Nope. Comes off the corner with a valiant effort and really swings out to try and get all the momentum he can, but he can't catch Raul Boesel, so they finish Unser Jr., Mansell, Paul Tracy in 3rd, Jacques Villeneuve, Stefan Johansson, Raul Boesel, Adrian Fernandez, Mauricio Gugelmin, and Teo Fabi.
You know, I think the biggest thing that's going to help little Al so far this season is this race, because this is the race where he won and Emil fell out. That's where he really makes a gain on the points.
All right, take a look at this. 1-1. What a play on words. Starting on the pole, finishing 1st. 5th time in his career.
And only once did he not accomplish that feat. And that was at Australia several years ago when he finished 1st, started 1st and finished 4th. It's interesting, all 4 winners from the pole at Cleveland have been driving for Roger Penske. Sullivan, Fittipaldi, Tracy, and Al Unser Jr. now.
Al Unser Jr., when he is hot, he is sizzling. And here at the Burke Lakefront Airport, he has taken the win. We'll be back. Unofficial for the moment in the Grand Prix of Cleveland presented by Goodyear, but it seems certainly official that Al Unser Jr. has taken the win, Jackaroo.
And Paul, he did it with a record speed of 138.3 miles per hour. Congratulations, man. Number 5 for the season.
Yeah, I tell you. I just got to thank the whole Marlboro Team Penske. This car is such a beautiful race car, and Ilmore engines, they've done their homework. You know, we're running right with the Cosworths, and so, you know, what can I say? It was a good day for the team.
What does a solid race car do for the mindset for a driver?
Well, it just, you know, it shows on the first lap. You know, the first couple laps, you know, how we kind of just pulled away from him, and makes it you start concentrating on your line instead of the guy behind you, and you can really start making everything happen for you, and the car just responds really well, and so it's great.
You know, it was one thing winning the Indianapolis 500. People said, well, he had the Mercedes engine, but now with the domination that you and the entire team is having, if you were on the other side of the coin like you were in other years, what would you be telling your crews right now about Team Penske?
Well, I'd tell you, I've been in that spot before, you know, and I've told them, gosh, they're just unbeatable. But this team is really a great team, and the car's a great car. And, you know, Richard Buck and the guys are just doing a great job preparing it. And so it's going to the end, and that's what we need.
With Roger Penske at the head of things, you've had a lot of great car owners, you've had a lot of great relationships with car owners, but what's the relationship between you and Roger Penske, and how is it developing and maturing as the season progresses?
Well, it's maturing really well. You know, we're getting to know each other more and more, and you know, me and Terry Satchel, my engineer, are starting to get to know each other more and more, and it's just great. You know,
I'm starting to tell in Roger's tone about what's going on, and so it's wonderful.
You know, before the start of the race, on camera, we talked about the fact that you knocked your teammate, Paul Tracy, out of the hunt for the $1 million bonus. But people forget that Team Penske has not been in the national championship limelight for what, maybe 7 years now, and that's really what your concentration is about.
That's right. You know, Roger, last time he won this championship was 1988, and I run second that year, and so the main thing about, you know, when we were talking about him hiring me and all that, he said all I wanted is the #1 on the car, and so that's all we're trying to give him.
Well, he's looking for that #1, and Gary Gerald, it doesn't ever get to be old hat in victory lane for Team Penske.
It certainly does. Nigel Mansell talking now with Peter Gibbons, his chief engineer on the Newman Haas team. His children and his wife had just arrived a moment ago. Nigel, let's get a word about your reaction to this event. And I know that there's a feeling I could sense as soon as you got out of the car. You gave it everything you could today, but this Penske team is just proving to be so very, very tough.
I thought I won. Didn't I win? It felt like I won. I waved the white flag and I threw it at him, but I even missed throwing it at him.
Now, you had a couple of adventures. Let's start first when you slapped the wall down here in turn 8 with the left rear.
Yeah, I mean, I got in a real big power slide, and I just didn't want to get out of it because I was sort of holding on to, I think it was port at the time. And I hit the wall real hard, but fortunately it was square. And then we had another incident coming out of the chicane where my teammate sideswiped me a little bit.
Yeah, no, I wanted to talk about that. What was the scenario from your seat?
No, he just came straight across.
You talk about this with him?
No, it's just one of those racing things. I just hope it wasn't on purpose. It shouldn't be, but I think he's got to watch where he's going a bit more.
Now, on the positive side of this day, you gained 2 positions in the point standings. You go now from 5th to 3rd. I would think that would be encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, the Newman Haas team just did a fantastic job today. There's no question that the Penske is the team to beat this year. I mean, they've got 3 fantastic drivers. Anyone can win at any race. And, I mean, as I said, I only came second today, but I feel as though the Newman Haas team won.
So we close out a day for you at Cleveland at the Burke Lakefront Airport, and they have signed up again for next year. A look at the final results from round 8 of the PPG IndyCar World Series. Al Unser Jr. with a victory. Nigel Mansell second. Paul Tracy third. Pretty much was there all day. Jacques Villeneuve, the fastest and quickest of the Reynards, in 4th. Stefan Johansson in a 93 Penske in 5th. Raul Boesel in 6th in his Lola Ford. Adrian Fernandez, the Mexican, in 7th. The Brazilian Gugelmin 8th. Italian Teo Fabi 9th. Italian Alessandro Zampedri in 10th. Robbie Gordon worked his way back up to 11th after running 24th at one point and will get 2 points. And Willie T. Ribbs scores his first points of the season with a 12th place finish. Brian Herter, a long weekend for him. 14th, Scott Goodyear, the Canadian, 14th. 15th, Hiro Matsushita. 16th, Andrea Montemini. 17th, Parker Johnston in the only Honda car engine to finish. In 18th, Michael Andretti after a first lap incident. 19th, Mike Groff, not running at the end. Emerson Fittipaldi, Lyndike Smith, Jeff Wood, Scott Sharp, all having their trouble as the day went on, as did teammate Dominic Dobson, Brazilian Marco Greco, Mario Andretti taken out by his teammate, as he says. Bobby Rahal is in 28th position, Ross Bentley 29th, Giovanni Lavaggi is listed as 30th. So that will wrap it up for the Cleveland Grand Prix.
Classic Sports Center Top 10s brought to you by Molson Canadian.
Start, obviously very wet. Conditions bad. Oh, Michael runs into the back of David. Looks like it's kind of hard to see, but Michael's pissed. Not looking too happy. He's got about 50 people in between him and David. Looks like he's not going to get close. This was a good one from last year. Harvick, he's got a really hot temper. Seems to always be getting in some kind of trouble. Drive into the side of the car, can't go anywhere. Jump out, get on top of the car. There goes the hands device. I don't think Ricky Rudd, the guy, I'd want to mess around with. Oh, this is me, ran out of fuel about 200 yards from the finish line at Montreal. We were running in 4th and ran out of fuel and lost 3 positions. So I was kind of upset. That's a $25,000 steering wheel that got broken. The old bump and run. like you can play the same highlight over and over again. There goes a boot protector, Ward Burton. He doesn't look very happy. Car going around. Elliott Sadler. Break your hand on the ambulance. Good thing he didn't break his hand. Jimmy Johnson gives a salute. Here's Ward Burton again. He doesn't look happy again. I like this one. This is Robbie Gordon. Tony Stewart's always the guy that plays the intimidator. He gives Robbie Gordon a shove, and then watch Robbie Gordon grab him back, and you notice Tony Stewart's eyes get real big, like, what do I do now? Uh-oh. He looks a little scared right here. Dominating weekend, pole both days, and a win. Oh, the old SARS mask. All in good fun, all in good fun. Tagliani, it's metrosexual, beard and mustache, looks great. Oh, this was a good one. Ari Leyendyke and AJ Foyt. Ari's mad, he should have won the race. It turned out he did win the race. He turns around, AJ gives him a cheap shot on the back of the neck and pushes him over when his back's turned. That's a sneaky Texan. Oh, nice right cross. Good follow through, good extension. Might have a second career as a boxer. This is the classic of all time. PK leading the race, lapping greasy old salad bar at the end of the race. And then, whammo, out of the race. That was pretty unfair, really. PK's mad. A couple of punches, and his best imitation of a David Beckham.
For more classic moments, tune in to ESPN Classic Canada, where the legends come to play.